Welcome, everybody. It's the Fourfold View podcast. We're a podcast dedicated to doing commentaries on books. You have myself, Curtis, Antoine, Greg, and Bay.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for viewing Fourfold View podcast. I'm here today with the fellas once again to go over the lost world of Adam and Eve. Fellas, how's everybody doing?
Good.
Good.
Fantastic.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and cover Proposition 4 of the book by John Walton. Want to kick it off with Brian. Brian, what'd you think?
So I'm going to read the second line because that hit me right off the jump. It was, our frequent reference to a 6-day account is at least in part the result of not knowing what to do with the seventh day. What does God resting have to do with creation? And I didn't really even grasp what the 7 days meant. I hear that reference all the time, but after reading this proposition, a lot of it came to light for me. I'm like, oh, I understand what that means. I had a lot of light bulb moments. So, and I'll touch on that throughout, but basically to me, the seventh day is just kind of it's not like a day of rest. It says like you're chilling and relaxing, but it's kind of, to me, it's like him enjoying his work. And that's all I really have. And I said, I'll touch more as we go.
I like that. For me, always look as the seventh day to rest, but also it's that family time. You get to enjoy your family. You get to, you work all week. So it's I see what God was doing. He created all of this magnificent world, and then all of a sudden 7 day, let me enjoy it. So I think that's what we're called to do on the Sabbath, is to just enjoy our family and friends and really just sit back and enjoy the fruits of our labor.
Yeah, and it also says in the same paragraph that Brian was talking from that rest is the objective of creation. We get so hung up on it being a materialistic creation story that for us day 7 is kind of confusing. Nothing happens, God just rests. But in reality, that's the whole objective of creation, is to put order, because we learned in the previous chapters that it's about creating order, not the actual material. And day 7 is about enjoying that order, and they call it a day of rest because you're not ordering anything anymore. You're resting from ordering stuff. You're just enjoying the creation.
Yeah. I think John Walton does a really good job of setting this book up to be kind of like what we're doing in order for us to be able to talk about these things. Because oftentimes in these chapters, he asks questions inside the chapter that really get you to think. Just in this chapter, he asks a few questions. He says, on the 7-day account, what is the purpose of the seventh day? What does God's resting have to do with creation? Is it a materialistic point of view, or is there, for me, is there too much order? And do we not appreciate the resting part? And God laying this out, I think it's so we don't forget that there needs to be some appreciation, like you said, Brian, some appreciation for his creation. And too much order, it is bad. If there's too much order, I think, at least from my perspective is that if there's too much order, it can denigrate things into tyranny. I mean, you see this over and over in the 19th century. There's also no utility for the creation. If everything's done for you, there's no free will. There's no autonomy amongst the things that are created. So I think that's also things that God intends for us to think about outside of just the fact that we should spend time with our family, even though we should, and we should appreciate the things that he's created, but to also not forget that too much order can be a bad thing, because then you lack the utility of being autonomous.
So I like that, and I don't know if this parallel will make sense to most people, but I think about when I go on vacation. You have those who have to structure every little thing that they do day by day by day. And that's great to have a game plan, but some of my best vacations have been when I've been able to be spontaneous and do something out of order, so to speak, to like just enjoy being in the moment, being somewhere new. And I think you make a good point. Too much order could be a bad thing. So I think that's really a big point why God is trying to, let us know, like, all right, take this day and chill.
Yeah, and even to go further down in the chapter, the author brings back that concept of home versus house, and you see in this particular analogy, the family has moved into the house, and no longer should they be concerned with the roof, the materialistic nature of the structure of the home, the foundation, the roof, the shingles, the footers, any of those things. Now it's more of ordering the house to make it a home, where furniture needs to go, where photos of the family need to go, what gives it that home quality. And then John Walton again asks another question, like, what's the purpose of ordering a home? Which brings us back to the Bible. The Bible isn't about the materialistic construction of our DNA, the materialistic construction of the evolution from the sea to land, or from the trees to the ground, what a lot of like primate evolution theories come from, but more of just more from the individual perspective, that like I should order my life in a way that provides a worldview that makes me most successful. And I think that's what he's trying to get across in asking why you should order your home versus why you should care about the shingles, even though they're important. The shingles are important. The construction of the foundation of the home is important, but none of that matters if you walk into a shell of a home and there's no furniture, there's no pictures of a family, there's no warmth that comes along with it. So
yeah, I love the analogy he's been using throughout the chapters about home versus house. And another point, I think, too, to connect it to the Bible and with the creation is, God, the creation story is about God creating order because this is where God lives. It's not just like he's going to create it and then watch from afar. And it kind of goes with the home analogy where, like you're saying, the plumbing and the foundation, everything's good, but you need to add your furniture, your pictures, because you intend to live there, not to set it up and then bounce. So, like, I think that ties into what he's trying to say about like the creation story is that God puts order with everything, creates order for the world and the cosmos and everything, because it's also where God lives. He's not just some distant God like some of the like mythological gods you hear about, the Greek gods and the Roman gods that create us to benefit them. God created all this and us to have a relationship.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much the same thing you just said with like I learned today, like what the cosmos even was, because I noticed that was referred earlier in the book. But for me, like learning, I was like, oh, that's not going to be that big of a deal. Because like earlier, I was going to ask you guys kind of what that meant, like a couple episodes ago, but then I was like, oh, it probably won't get brought up again. I'll figure it out. Well, then it's half this chapter is about it. And like the one line that stood out that made me like ding ding was the cosmos is not just a house, it's a home. Like literally that. And I was like, oh, so like the cosmos is like his home. Like I never fully knew like what they meant when they were referring to cosmos. I was very lost on that. And it's not that I was too shy to ask. I just thought it wasn't like not going to come up as much, I guess. And then now I've learned that it does. And that's why I was like, oh, okay, I figured that out now. And then there was like another part that says, so he explains to them that God had planned for the cosmos to be sacred space with him dwelling in the midst of his people. He had set cosmos and ordered it for that very purpose, which is basically like what Greg just said, but that was just like a second part of the cosmos that made me light bulb and ding, ding, ding. Okay, now I'm really starting to get it. And I think what John Walton, like Curtis was saying earlier, John Walton, man, he's really good at this and he helps me learn from it. Like he's teaching me. Like I'm not saying I'm going his ways, but like how he explains things, make it in simple terms for someone like me that doesn't know a lot about the Bible, that can follow along and kind of like get these like light bulbs in my head.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like he does a good job of opening your eyes, no matter your amount of exposure or knowledge, I guess you can say, with theology or the Bible, because there's a lot packed into his chapters and the way he writes it. But also, I like to say he simplifies it to like where a 5-year-old can get like, oh, the house is the structure and the home is, the feel good stuff in there, the order. So I agree with you, and it's funny. In the line you read, I actually highlighted as well. So
Yeah, and Brian, to bring it back to what you were saying, if you see this relationship between all these ancient cultures and space, like looking up and the stars. And I don't know if I've said this. I've said it plenty of times. I don't know if I've said it on the show before, but I think the light pollution that exists today does us a disservice. That we get disconnected from the cosmos, like we get disconnected from God's home because of light pollution. Like when we go outside, we may see, at least for me, like living in a city, like 4 or 5 stars at night. These ancient cultures, they seen hundreds of thousands. I mean, you see that in the Bible when God is talking to Abraham and he says, look up, I will give you, the amount of people, or the amount of people that you see as stars, like these nations of people in the mass amount of stars and constellations that you see in the world. I mean, in the sky. Like we don't get that. At least I don't get that here in the city. Like I go outside, it's like, man, you gave Abraham like 8 folks. Like, you know what I mean? Like you ain't really we don't really get that. So I think, like I said, I think that just does us a disservice. And Greg, to what you're saying, back to this house and home and the order, that shows you again what we're talking about, this orientation motif and this order versus chaos. And again, another thing you see, there's a line that he says in like the 3rd paragraph. He caps it off by saying to establish equilibrium of order. And so it's not the answer to chaos is an order, and the answer to order isn't chaos. Like there's this balancing act. And you even see that in Taoism. You see that in the Toti Chang, the like the yin and the yang symbol. I think I mentioned it before. But it just in other cultures, like you see all these different or these similar motifs in all these ancient cultures. For me, is why like its strength is my faith, because you don't just see it in Christianity. You see it all over the world. You see the flood myth all over the world in the Mesopotamian creation stories, and the Toti Chang. In Hindu, like you see, in Indian culture, you see it all around the world. So for that type of story to resonate everywhere, like to me, makes the Bible have a little bit more of an authentic feel.
Yeah, I mean, I want to touch on what you were kind of talking about, Curtis, is like under the section he has about ancient Near Eastern concept of divine rest, basically saying how the whole ancient world thought of it, not just I guess what turned out to be Christians, early Israel, I guess. I just highlight a few things here I wanted to read real quick, was that God has ordered the cosmos with the purpose of taking up his residence in it and ruling over it. Day 7 is the reason for days 1 through 6. It is the fulfillment of God's purpose. And he goes on to say that in the ancient world, a God's place and his temple is established so that people can relate to him by meeting his needs ritually. That is not the case with our God. He wants to relate to his people in an entirely different way. It says that in this home story, God is not only making a home for people, he's making a home for himself. Though he has no need of a home for himself, if God does not rest in this ordered space, the 6 days are without their guiding purpose. Again, it's just about living in what he ordered, living among us. The whole creation story is about him ordering what has already been created by him, but materialistically, to provide for us in order to have a relationship with us, just because God loves us so much.
I can say, Greg, it's like I didn't even read the chapter. I just stole your notes. And because we're on the same exact page. I was thinking the exact same thing you've just been saying, honestly. And then going back to like what Curtis was saying with the stars, like I go back to the old saying, like, let the stars be your God, because that's what they had to do back in the day. But in reality, that's like thinking of it in the moment, it's kind of like let God be your God, because that's his spot. Like the North Star is like the #1 star that everybody knows. It's the brightest, that's north. to me, that's like God's specific like temple. That's his legit like his home, if you will, to me. You know, I mean, that could be right or wrong, but it's kind of like that's his spot, and that's your number one guide to survival back then. And now that, you know, and I think a lot of evil to an extent happens in the city, and it happens everywhere, but because, like you said, with the light pollution, we don't get to see as clearly all the time. And when people go on vacations to like the country or the mountains or nature, anywhere the nature, I feel like people are at peace. And a lot of that's because, like, to me, it's you're with God in that moment. He's helping you survive that, because you're out in the middle of nowhere that really people shouldn't really be able to survive. Like, I mean, you should, but you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like, it's here, it's just so given to us almost. It's like second nature. We can go to the grocery store and get food. Out there, you got to figure it out. You know what I'm saying? And like, figuring it out is because he's helping you figure it out. It's not because you know what the heck you're doing, really. Like, it is, but like, he taught you that some way, somehow, whether it is by bringing someone in your life that taught you that physically, but he gave that person that blessing to teach you how to do it. And in that instinct, just to know how to survive. Because like, no matter what, all of us at the end of the day, we get thrown into the woods with nothing. We're going to find a way to survive, at least for a while, just based on pure instinct and not having a clue how to hunt or gather or anything. It's just literally just how to do it on your own, because he's going to guide you. And that's just my opinion.
I think it's an excellent point you brought up, because I agree. And it ties into what Curtis was saying earlier. Too much order, aka I guess city life, can be bad, where you get thrown out into the country and more surrounded by God's creation. I mean, everything's created by him, but like the true creation, and you use the North Star or the guidance that you have, and God's, you can like connect to God better, I feel like. I'm not saying it's impossible in the city. I mean, we're all in the city, but it's something more about being out in the country, like you were saying. So I think that was an excellent point, Brian, because it tied in to Curtis's too much order could be bad scenario.
Yeah, it's like something like the city is like something that man has put their hands on and tainted to an extent. Not saying that cities aren't great, but it's like something we've done a lot too on our own, like obviously under God's will, but it's like that almost helps us enjoy what he created back in the day, like nature, a little more. You know, appreciate it a little more when you do get to go to it, like when you live in the city, at least for me.
Yeah, I agree, because I think the city sets you up too, because since we created a lot of it, we feel like we can control the majority of it, where being in the country, you have less control. And I think it just ties back into the more general concept of order.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And there's this part further down after you guys are talking, that ties into what you're saying, Brian. The sentence is, the rest that he offers, talking about God, his people, refers to freedom from invasion and conflict, so that they can live at peace and conduct their daily lives without interruption. And, you know, that's that being out in the wilderness and God's still providing these things for you. So you can succeed. And there's this funny, like, and this is how the Bible comes to life for me. So there's a separation from the Old Testament and the New Testament. And there's 400 years called the intertestamental period, right? So if you don't know that, Brian, it's like the end of Malachi and then the beginning of Matthew. So there's 400 years. God doesn't talk to anybody, no more prophets, none of that. But what's so funny is a lot of people are like, why would God give up? You know, why did he wait so long to send Jesus? Like all this stuff, right? But if you think about what happens in that 400 years, so you have all these great empires, Persia, Greece, Rome. So you have these rises and falls of these empires. So what takes place in this 400 years, which is kind of like cool. So you have the Pax Roma, right? So you have this time where the Roman Empire pretty much conquers everything. And they lay out roads that the apostles used to travel and make the spreading of the gospel easier. You have this peacetime because Roman basically whoop up on everybody. So nobody trying to fight the Romans. So it's very peaceful. So the gospel can be spread easier and they don't have to deal with, war-torn countries. And then, prior to that, you have Greece, you have Alexander the Great, who is trying to get the whole world to be under one tongue, right? So the Greek culture, the Greek language, the Septuagint. So you have the whole world pretty much now being dominated by the Greek language, which then again makes the translation of the Hebrew Bible easier, allows more people to get their hands on it, allows the gospel to spread even more. And then all this stuff happens over this 400 years. And then when Jesus does come, it's people know about him. The gospel has been spread to an extent, not the gospel yet, but the formulation of what is to come, the formulation of of God manifesting himself in human form. And like, that's wild to me. That's wild to me that God set all that stuff up and provided all that for his people because of what he knew was to come. And, you see that in the desert with Moses and the Exodus. Like, you see all these examples of God still providing all the necessities for his people to flourish. Even from an outlooker, it just looks so unvictorious.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I knew about the intertestamental period, but never really thought about what you said. Like, it allowed time for the roads to be constructed by the Roman Empire that they were able to use to make it easier to spread the gospel. And then the Greek Empire, people were speaking more of a similar tongue, or at least understood that tongue, so it's easier to spread the stories. Yeah, it's just wow. But it's the whole thing, like, God knows the bigger picture, and I'm glad that you pointed out at the beginning of your moment there with that, what you said about the rest, that it allows people to undertake and to secure their place in the land and not be distracted. I just want to say one last thing about the city thing is cities aren't bad. It's just when you have the more of the freedom, aka, I guess, Brian's example of the country, you're more likely to be reliant on God, where if you're in a city, it's more ordered, where you think man thinks they have control and they can push God out. So I just wanted to add that. I was thinking about that before too. But the point you brought up, Curtis, it kind of blew my mind. It all like pieces together. It just makes, God knows what he's doing. He's laying down the blueprint or the dirty work to continue on with his grand plan.
No, I agree. And like the way Curtis put it with like history, it kind of really ties into something I was saying at work to a coworker. Because I had mentioned, I was like, I got to run out. I got to get, I got this chapter to read. I can get on the Zoom. And she said, oh, what are you reading? And I told her, and I told her about she said, oh, what's that about? And my answer naturally was, I was like, well, it's about God, but it's like also about history. And then really thinking about when I said that, I was like, well, it is about both, because God is history. He's the one who created our history. And I never really, that was like, that light bulb didn't hit literally until Curtis was just talking. And I'm like, that makes sense. It's probably why I said it like that, because that's literally what that is. God created history. And I've always been so into history, and not saying I haven't been into God, but I haven't read the Bible. I haven't got into it like that. But now I'm more excited to go reference it, because I'm like, man, I've always been into history, and it's not clicking in my head that God is history. That's what he did. He obviously created everything, but it's just something that if you're not going to church or learning the scripture or anything like that, it's just like us common folk, if you will, that don't know it. We don't put two together all the time. And now it's like, ding, light bulb. And that's what I'm loving about this book and like the talks we're having, because like I'm learning from you guys that can put it in the biblical way. And I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like it goes in my head a different way sometimes, but I'm just glad that he said it like how you said it, Curtis, like with the history part of it. And I'm like, that makes complete sense now. And no, I hadn't heard of that before you said that, but you explaining it makes me want to go read it, and I'll understand it in that light. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this quote, man, I wish I could remember who I can attribute it to, because I don't want to, like, it's not me. I really wish, if anybody remembers, or if anybody, like after I said, if type it in the comments or let us know or whatever. But it's hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And like sometimes I feel like that's where we are in a society. That's the concept of the city. Like things are so easy for us now, and compared to where they were, especially in the culture and the times that we're reading about, that it's like we don't have a lot of stuff to complain about, so we just gotta pick anything, to just rile up a storm, to like get our like testosterone going, to get that like fight or flight, mechanisms firing, to get that tribalistic like hunter kind of mentality riled up. We have to pick, first we have to pick a side. So are we going to be BLM? Are we going to be, Blue Lives Matter? Black Lives Matter? Like, which one are we going to pick? Is it going to be, red or blue? Are we going to pick, pro-life, pro-choice? Like we have to pick these things, and then we have to just jump into the deep end of these tribes, no matter what they believe, but just so we're a part of something. Because life is easy, like you said, Brian, we could go to the grocery store, we can go get food at any time, we don't even have to cook it. We could just run through a line and it's there. We have cars that could, travel hundreds of thousands of miles. Like we could relocate, and I'm not saying it's really easy for everybody. I know plenty of people have their struggles, self-included. But compared to like being lost in the desert, like for 40 years and watching your family die and having to choose, which kids are going to live and die, how you're going to eat, where the food's going to come from. You had to depend on God. Like you had to, like to be honest, like I depend on God, obviously, but I don't have to depend on God. Like I got a good job. Like I got a good family. Like in my head, like obviously all of that is because of God. None of it's possible without God. But I'm saying like I can rationalize to myself that, I just go to work. I could, I can play video games. I could, take care of my kids when I want. I could do this and that. And like, I don't really need him for anything because my life is so good. And I forget, and we forget sometimes that it is good because of his grace.
Yeah. I agree. Like one thing I've learned getting closer to God, and this was even before I realized I was getting closer to God, was that I let a lot of things go. Like stress is one of our number one killers in America, or in the world probably, but I know America. And I stopped letting stuff get to me. Of course, things do, but I really, really try not to let them. And when they start to, I kind of, that's when I have my moment like, oh, help me get through this one. I need to like breathe, hold on. I got a woo-saw, if you will, like relax. And it's, man, just getting closer to him helps me just understand that, just let him guide me through that stress, and not worry about it. Like, and I feel like that's going to help me not live forever, but live a long, healthy life, because I just let him handle it. I'm not going to worry about it if I have no control over it, whether it's bills, work, whatever, like anything that can happen, any tribulation comes in your life, just give it a moment, let him handle it, let him walk you through it. And I was doing that earlier than I realized he was there with me, because I used to stress about everything. And I was like, now I'm just a lot more laid back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it ties in perfectly to what Curtis was even just saying too, is the fact that like Brian, you're saying like we are so comfortable these days now, if you will, like as a human species, that we find things to worry about or stress us out or to complain about, to get all riled up about. I think I even heard it on a Joe Rogan podcast a while back that like we're so coddled now that we don't, most of us don't hunt for our food or have to plant our food or, build shelters and blah, 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 that we try to find things to complain about and create these hardships that in the big picture, and by the grace of God, that a lot of this doesn't even matter. It's just, it's all about the bigger picture. So I think, Brian, you hit it just dead on. To complement what Curtis was saying, was the fact that it's just finding the peace of God in this order that he created.
Yeah, no, I agree. One of my favorite quotes is to let go and let God. And I think that basically covers everything. Like Brian said, you would sit there and worry about every little thing, but what we have to realize is that we serve a big God, and all these things that are big to us are very small to him. So he's able to handle it far greater than I could. So that's about putting that trust and faith in him. And I do want to help Curtis out a little bit. I wanted to help you a little further on. You were wanting to know who wrote that quote. And the author's name is G. Michael Hoff. So he is the one who wrote The Hard Times Create Strong Men Create Good Times, so on and so forth. So just kind of wanted to throw that in there.
And I think all that too, this is all perfect because it ties back into the book here. And the point that John Walton's trying to make too is that it's hard for us these days to think like the ancient people did because of everything we just said. We're so coddled now that we create anthills into mountains where the ancient people wouldn't even think of that stuff. I mean, obviously they didn't have bills and car problems and all that jazz that we have now, but like they had true big problems, and they also had a certain viewpoint of what we see in scripture. And if we can understand how the ancient people thought, it almost simplifies and helps us understand the true meaning, the true story behind creation, the way that the author here is portraying in this book.
Yeah, and to bring it full circle, that I think is the role of that the Sabbath plays. It plays the role of not work in the fashion of doing something, but the motivation to do those things for the self. Constantly in the Bible, you see when Jesus does work and he's serving, the Pharisees, Sadducees, they have these issues because they correlate the Sabbath with no work. Like, you're not supposed to do anything, but that's not, no, it's to have rest in God and to fight off those fleshly desires to make another day filled with things that you want to get accomplished for your own, self-righteous, self. Yeah. Trying
to create your own order. It's a break from trying to create your own order.
So, and then, and above all, John Walton makes this transition from getting people to understand, rest because of the relationship that he wants to have. And then you see this, this idea of sacred spaces and rest and relationships start to build and build and build. And then it comes to the culmination of the temple being built, which is, that right there is the purpose, that gives us the direct connection for a sacred space. Obviously even now, like we as, people, we don't have the ability to go to space. They definitely didn't, but like the temple allowed God to, come to them, almost to come to a place where they could worship and they could connect, and they laid out all these rules and these rituals. Obviously they didn't have Jesus. I mean, they had Jesus, but he didn't come and be crucified and things like that. But you see the temple in all throughout all history of civilization, even now. I mean, you see it in Mesopotamian cultures. You see it. Abraham flees from it. The ziggurat and the child or the land of Un or however you pronounce it. He's leaving those temples, those cultures. You see it in cathedrals. In the New Age church. Even today, you see stadiums like. People, if you knew nothing about football, if you knew nothing about religion, and you came and you seen people in cathedrals and you see people in churches and then you see people in football stadiums, like you'd be like, oh, they the same, they just worship in different stuff. You know what I mean? It's this game that they worship and these players that they worship, and they are those gods. And you even see that in like old Mesoamerican cultures. They used to play, these ritual football, like similar to like soccer games, as like these ritualistic ways to connect to God and stuff like that. You see that in all cultures throughout the history. So it again, one of those things that makes the Bible have some validity, have some authenticity, because you still see the same stuff now as you did thousands of years ago.
Yeah, that's a great point. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna have one spin off of that with his football analogy. Is to me, like going to a football game and that feeling you get with just being a fan and all that is almost like a manufactured feeling of the same thing I've been getting reading this book and connecting to God. Like, I've never had a book move me really before, and this one is like all the stresses I've had for past couple of weeks in the past week, and I finally got to sit down and read, and it just brings me to this different place that I've never been before. And I feel like it's just real quick. It's just like I said, the manufacture that you get being at a baseball game or a football game is like a manufactured feeling of what I'm getting from this, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's kind of what I was about to say too. It's about, like Curtis has mentioned, about the temple, and then your example with football, baseball, sporting events. It's about rituals, and rituals, create like functionaries. It's installing the functions, which then ultimately circles back to, again, what we've been talking about. Creation is creating order, creating function. So like Curtis hit on it with the temple. And it further in the same section of the book, it goes on to say that God had planned for the cosmos to be a sacred space or a temple, with him dwelling in the midst of his people. He had set up the cosmos and ordered it for that very purpose. He was preparing a place for them. So it's the same temple concept, the sporting event concept is creating the functionaries, and that's the whole purpose of creation.
No, very good point. So as we wrap up, please feel free to comment. Let us know your takeaways from Proposition 4. And of course, please like, share, subscribe to our channel. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we look forward to going over Proposition number 5. So hope everybody enjoy the rest of your day.